Hey, it's John Lee Dumas of EO Fire, and it's The Entrepreneurial You, the show for dedicated and passionate Caribbean entrepreneurs seeking daily inspiration, brought to you by author, speaker, and award-winning entrepreneur Henika Watkis Porter. You must be prepared to ignite.
From a neuroscience perspective, neuroscientists have been able to study what happens in the brain when we have that aha moment. And so they can kind of set people up for the aha moment and have them on an MRI machine. And so we know that when we're having that burst, in our mind of like, oh, I have this new idea, what we can see is in the brain about a third of a second before that aha moment, there's a burst of gamma waves above our right ear. So there's a certain part of the brain, it's called the anterior temporal gyrus. And what we see is that there's this gamma wave burst and also a rush of blood into that part of the brain. And then even a full second before that, scientists have found that there's a burst of alpha waves in the right occipital cortex, which is where we see. It's part of our vision cortex. And so it suppresses vision for just a millisecond. Scientists call it the brain blink.
Hi, this is Henika. I'm so glad you took the time to stop by today. In Jamaican parlance, Wagwan. I'm glad to say it there. This episode is sponsored by HenikaWatkisporter.com as well as the Jamaica Stock Exchange. Now, on HenikaWatkisporter.com, you can visit us for blogs, resources, books, online podcast courses, podcasts, and more. If you are new to the Entrepreneurial You podcast, be sure to check out past episodes with guests such as John Lee Dumas, Patrice Washington, Seth Godin, Richard Branson, Amy Porterfield, and a host of other game changers.
We needed to raise capital, but our experience with local financial institutions was that they were cautious and slow to act, and interest rates were far too high. We had real concerns about financing our business through outside equity investors and the possibility of interference. Could we get a fair valuation for our business? We had our own ideas about the business and its value. Should I go the traditional route of bank financing, or should I try the Jamaica Stock Exchange? So we made a call and experienced transformation of our business through conversations. I'm John Mahfood, CEO of Jamaican Teas, and we're listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange.
Give us a call today at 876-967-3271 to begin your transformation through conversation. We want to see your company listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange.
And now, here's today's episode. The most talented, thought-provoking, game-changing people are never normal. Richard Branson. Hey, how are you? What a go-on? Welcome to episode 164 of the Entrepreneurial You podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Henika Watkis Porter. Now, on this episode, I'm going to be talking with Dr. Britt Andreatta. Dr. Britt is an internationally recognized thought leader who creates brain science-based solutions for today's challenges. As CEO and president of Seventh Mind, Inc., Britt Andreatta draws on her unique background in leadership, neuroscience, psychology, and learning to unlock the best in people and organizations. Of course, she's a published author and she's just accomplished so many things, and just the reason why we will be talking today about the neuroscience of innovation and creativity. Welcome, Dr. Britt.
Please call me Britt, and it is so lovely to talk to you today and also to connect with your followers.
Absolutely. My pleasure to have, we met at the ATD conference in San Jose, and it was lovely meeting you, I must tell you again, and I'm happy that we connected after that we're having this conversation.
Me too. Very excited.
All right. So before chatting about innovation and creativity and neuroscience and all of that good jazz, have you ever had any Jamaican food?
I have. I've actually traveled in Jamaica and I love it.
When were you in Jamaica?
Oh my God. It was back in my college days. So many eons ago. But very much enjoy the people and the country and the food and all of that, the music. All wonderful.
Awesome. If I had $1 for every time somebody talks about, our people, and I'm going to have to now connect with our Jamaica Tourist Board for this podcast and see, because about the fact that it's always about the people. Really, really love that.
Yeah, just warm, kind, generous spirits. And I know that is true for you too. So lovely to be on your podcast today.
Awesome sauce. All right. So what really is neuroscience before we get any further?
Yeah, so neuroscience is just the study of the neural system. So our central nervous system is our brain and our spinal cord. And then the peripheral nervous system is all the other nerves that go through your body to activate your muscles and all that. And everything we do, everything we think, feel, and do goes through our neural system. So I love studying neuroscience because it adds a whole new layer of understanding to things we do every day.
Awesome. All right. So now we're just not looking at it in isolation, but now we're connecting it to innovation and creativity. But before you make that connection, is there a distinction between the two? Because sometimes when people say innovation, they're talking about you being creative and vice versa. So is there a connection? Are they different?
They're actually very different, but we flip-flop the words all the time. So I do like to give people a definition because we want to be using it correctly. So creativity is really, unleashing the potential of the mind to conceive new ideas. When you have those like aha moments or flashes of insight, coming up with an idea, that's an act of creativity. Innovation, on the other hand, is the work that's required to take an idea and make it viable. So it's really more like a process like design thinking. And you can kind of think of it like if creativity is coming up with an idea, innovation is capitalizing on that idea. So innovation is really kind of the go-to-market aspect of it. And creativity is really the aha moment aspect of it. So creativity comes first. And then we can do innovation with lots of different kinds of ideas. And so another way to think of it is creativity is spending money to generate ideas, and innovation is spending ideas to generate money.
Well, I've just had my own aha moment right here. So pretty much I like to think of Mel Robbins talk about the 5-second rule, right? And I also like to talk about the fact that, which means that when you think about something, you need to implement it as quickly as possible. Otherwise, your brain kicks in and give you all sorts of reasons not to. And I like to talk about, the difference, the further the difference between ideation and execution, it's the more likelihood that you will not act at all. So there is some clarity here, and I can see the sequence as you are talking about it. So the creativity comes first and then the innovation follows. I like it a lot. So now, what does neuroscience have to do with both of them? What's the connection? Do we take neuroscience into consideration when we talk about creativity and innovation?
Well, for sure we do. So let me talk a little bit about them separately.
Right.
So from a neuroscience perspective, neuroscientists have been able to study what happens in the brain when we have that aha moment. And so they can kind of set people up for the aha moment and have them on an MRI machine. And so we know that when we're having that burst, in our mind of like, oh, I have this new idea, what we can see is in the brain about 1/3 of a second before that aha moment, there's a burst of gamma waves above our right ear. So there's a certain part of the brain, it's called the anterior temporal gyrus. And what we see is that there's this gamma wave burst and also a rush of blood into that part of the brain. And then even a full second before that, scientists have found that there's a burst of alpha waves in the right occipital cortex, which is where we see. It's part of our vision cortex. And so it suppresses vision for just a millisecond. Scientists call it the brain blink. But they've also kind of put 2 and 2 together that this is oftentimes why we have good ideas in places like the shower, is because we've kind of taken our visual offline. There's not a whole lot of stimulating things to look at in the shower, and we have the white noise and everything. We kind of set up this environment that allows this process to happen naturally. We also can just set people up to have aha moments now that we understand them a little bit more. One aspect of it is called preparing the brain. So you kind of take in a lot of information. You're trying to kind of fill your brain with lots of things that it could have aha moments about. So one of the recommendations is that you take in information from sources that are not your normal go-to. So it's kind of like if you walk into the bookstore and you're trying to grab a bunch of books, you would make sure you go to different sections of that bookstore and get books that you wouldn't normally go to, even ones that make you uncomfortable, because you're giving your brain kind of more to throw in the pot, so to speak, and stew on. And then the next thing you do is set up the resting neocortex, which means you just take a break from trying to figure it out. And that's why showers are so wonderful, is that when we stop thinking about something or we stop trying to figure it out, that's oftentimes when the different parts of the brain can make that connection and generate that aha moment. And then if you want to even further help yourself, you can do what scientists call sensory gating, which is like closing your eyes, for example, and shutting off the visual cortex, or, having a shower. Things that you can do to kind of, meditating is another example. You kind of shut down some of your senses to prime the pump, so to speak, and have that aha moment come even faster.
And in addition to that, I find that it's my experience. So if I'm walking, for example, I'm trying to solve a problem, I find that when I walk, go for my regular walks in the evening, I find that answers come and those aha moments come when I least expected them. But it's because I find that my mind is not as active as it normally would be.
Exactly. So when you're going on your walk, you've done kind of that process, right? And we also know that in addition to water seems to be a great thing that helps, being around it, in it, under it, on top of it, but also just nature in general. So going for a walk, I suspect you're seeing trees and you're seeing bumblebees and you're seeing grass and flowers. Nature, being in around nature also seems to facilitate this as well. So you were naturally doing it, Hanneke. You were already doing the process.
So how about persons who like to maybe, it seemed like when you're in that more relaxed mode, right? That's when it happens. So how about persons who perhaps will find that moment in a coffee shop, which although it may seem very noisy and seem, counter to what we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it works differently for each of us. So it's just kind of, typically we don't have the aha moment when we're sitting there thinking about it. When we're trying to have an aha moment, it doesn't happen. It's when we take that break. So for some people, the act of going to a coffee shop is a little bit relaxing, or it takes them out of their normal workspace. So it creates a new environment. It works different for each of us. But, the focus here is find what works for you. And give yourself permission to take a break, because oftentimes it's the break that generates the very thing you were trying to find.
So exactly. So, I mean, what I'm picking up from what you're saying, intrinsic in this argument, is that breaking from your routine, whatever that is. So even if it's not a traditional quieter or traditional, more relaxing moment, but breaking from that routine will provide space for that, creativity and innovation to flourish.
Yes, it definitely helps. After you've done the preparing the brain, then giving yourself a break and then letting that moment happen.
Entrepreneurs are busy people. We are always, it seems, on the grind. How can we best position ourselves, given this information that you've shared with us? How can we best prepare ourselves to improve our businesses both in terms of developing new products or new ideas, to launch new products and so on? What recommendation or piece of advice would you be able to share with our entrepreneurs?
Well, one would be to just do the process I talked about, right? Is to just start being intentional about setting yourself up for ideas. And that includes giving yourself the break. I think entrepreneurs, myself included, can kind of fall under the spell of just dig in and work harder, more hours, longer hours, when really it's those breaks that help. Also, your physical workspace makes a difference. Having high ceilings, having expansive views, if you can have a water feature, if you can have plants, all of those things help. And then as entrepreneurs, you're going to be bringing other people onto your team. And if you really want to have an innovative organization, you want to think about, well, how do I create these environments for other people too? And we definitely want to give people permission to take that walk, or, Ariana Huffington has nap pods in her office because she knows that sometimes people just need that 20-minute nap to get refreshed and ready to go. So I think it's about thinking about what brings out the best in yourself and also what brings out the best in your team. And it's not always just grinding harder. And we can sometimes fall under that spell. And then, in terms of innovation is a different thing. So there's some tips and strategies I can share about innovation as well. But if we're staying focused right now on creativity, it's, I know for myself, I now intentionally do this process. So I'll take a bunch of stuff in and I'll let it stew in the brain, and then I'll be okay taking a break and going for a walk, or making sure I get my weekend. Before I used to feel a little bad, like, oh, I should keep working on this. But now I'm like, nope, the brain's still doing its thing. And then here's a funny, potential opportunity. And I would point people to the book that Michael Pollan wrote on this topic. But there's been a lot of research around psychedelics. And in fact, the history of Silicon Valley points to psychedelics, saying that they would never have come up with the microchip if they had not been using psychedelics. So there's a whole kind of new generation of entrepreneurs who are intentionally doing microdosing, because what we know is the brain on psychedelics, the default mode network, which generally acts as our kind of traffic controller and not allowing all parts of the brain to talk to each other at the same time, because it would make us go crazy. It goes offline. And that's why people can have these amazing experiences where they can taste color or see sound, something that's called synesthesia. But we know that on psychedelics, people will have these creative aha moments too. So some people are using that as part of their formula. And it's particularly big in the entrepreneurial community in Silicon Valley.
Mm-hmm. So there is no shortage really of resources and ideas and, options to choose from. Speaking of books, you have written a few,
Yes.
Right? Wired to Connect, Wired to Grow. And I'm sure tell me about some of the others that you've done and what has been your focus mainly.
Once I kind of discovered this new way of looking at things through the lens of neuroscience, I first started with the book Wired to Grow. It's on how we learn and how to maximize our learning. I just redid it with a second edition. So there's a new version of that one that just came out this year. And then the second book I wrote is called Wired to Resist: The Brain Science of Why Change Fails and a New Model for Driving Success. Because we know that people are very resistant to change. And so this really gives you a whole new way of understanding change and why you're going to hit resistance. But once you understand why, you can then be really intentional about helping people move through it and becoming more adaptable. And then the third book I wrote is Wired to Connect, which is all about the brain science of peak performing teams and ways to enhance collaboration, and lots of really fascinating research about what brings out the best in teams.
Mm-hmm. And you're also you're working on a new one now, aren't you?
Yeah. So the one I'm working on now is all about innovation, creativity, and purpose.
It's not something that I've actually delved in deeply before, but I have been thinking about it a lot, especially since coming back, meeting you and seeing all the various things, the various, way that you have presented and dealt with this topic. So I'm really intrigued, and I'm encouraging our community to delve in it as well and to learn more. What piece of information would you like to share with our community, on this topic, Britt, that we've not yet talked about?
Well, I spent a little time talking about creativity, so let me talk a little bit about innovation. So innovation is something that, there's lots of studies on it. 84% of executives consider that their future success is either very or extremely dependent on innovation, right? So entrepreneurs, company leaders all around the world knows that innovation is important. And yet oftentimes they're not really investing it in the way they think. There's actually two paths to innovation. One is the breakthrough path. So it's a little bit of that aha moment, right? It's having some big idea that's transformative, that disrupts the market. And that path involves risk, right? You have to kind of spend money on kind of going at something in a new way. And the payoff is that you really transform the industry. The other path is incremental, which is taking stuff you're already doing and then taking small steps to improve or enhance it. So taking a product and then making it a little bit better and a little bit better, or, getting your time to market a little bit faster and a little bit faster. So it's small steps, it's incremental steps. And what's interesting is that while leaders say they invest in innovation, what they're really doing is putting most of their resources into the continuous improvement or the small steps path rather than the disruptive risk. In fact, one study found that 78% of innovation portfolios are allocated to the continuous improvement rather than the disruptive risks. So one of the things I like to work with when I'm working with leaders is really just looking at, okay, how are you thinking about this in your organization? Are you giving some resources and dedicating some teams to that aha moment process and letting them break a lot of glass and making it really safe for them to experiment and fail and try again? And then are you putting some money and some resources into this continuous improvement? We want it to be more even rather than really overweighted in continuous improvement, because you're not going to then get that big aha moment happening. In addition, I like to ask leaders, so where are you sourcing your innovation? And the top two places they source it is with their customers and their employees. And yet, there's other options. Are they working with academic institutions or scientists? Are they working with venture capitalists? Are they working with, industry analysis, suppliers and vendors? There's different ways that you can source innovation. And if you kind of just put it all within your employee bucket, that's great, but you're kind of cutting yourself off from lots of other great sources of innovation.
So you're saying that innovation doesn't necessarily have to be expensive. You don't have to, you can be very incremental.
A lot of it is just those improvements you're making to your current products and services, right? But you should definitely dedicate some resources to, kind of the inspiration, ideation, implementation side of it, which is really having a design thinking approach where you let people prototype and break some glass and fail and try again, because that's where the big disruptive breakthroughs come that really give you the competitive advantage.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of companies, because I've seen it, and it's so interesting that the topic for a feature for LeaderCast that I was going to be hosting in Jamaica on May 7th, the theme is actually positive disruption. We're looking at how do you enable and your teams to give them that leverage that they can be disruptive without feeling like, I'm fearful. I don't want to cross this border, this boundary. How can we now therefore ensure that teams are allowed that leeway?
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of my favorite tools for this, if you want to play with it, is the book Sprint. It's by Jake Knapp, who worked at Google for a long time. And he's created this 5-day prototyping process where it's filled with activities and exercises and worksheets. He also has some other stuff on their website, thesprintbook.com. But it's a great way to put people into this 5-day innovation process. And it's really inexpensive to implement it, but it's pretty amazing what it generates.
So I'm sure that my community is going to be reaching out to you to hear more from what you have to say, Britt, about innovation, creativity, and neuroscience, just putting it all together. And I know that you've already mentioned that you have a giveaway for our community as well. So as we wrap up, I'm going to ask you for just your final thoughts, as well as to share that information and where they might be in touch with you, how they may connect with you.
Okay, so the best place to reach me is either on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and I'd love for folks to connect with me there. And then also my website is my name, BrittAndreatta.com. So BrittAndreatta.com. And then we're going to be offering a free chapter from my newest book, Wired to Grow, on creativity. So we'll be able to share that with you, as well as a free 30-day trial to LinkedIn Learning, where I have several courses online.
Oh, that is fantastic. LinkedIn Learning, I'm sure that is going to be, they're going to gravitate towards it, as well as that free chapter of your book as well. So thank you so much, Britt Andreatta, Dr. Britt Andreatta. I am so, so happy that you took some time to share with me, share with my community. And I look forward to connecting with you further and wish you all the best on your onward journey.
Same to you, Henneke. Have a lovely day.
And thank you, my peak performer, for tuning in to this episode with Dr. Britt Andriato. I look forward to connecting with you next week. In the meantime, you can reach out to me at HennekeWatkisporter.com. There's a WhatsApp icon right on my homepage. And when you send me a message, it will come directly to me. So please, I want to hear from you. You mean a lot to me. The fact that you spend time out of your schedule to listen to what I have to say. Me and my guests, I really value and appreciate you. So thank you so much. Remember, you were born to win, but to be a winner, you must plan to win, prepare to win, and expect to win. What good?